Every night at 3 a.m., I hear my dead brother asking me to open the door. I haven't told anyone this. Not my family, not my friends. I'm not even sure why I'm writing it down here. I guess I just need someone to believe me, or at least to read this before it happens again tonight. It's been exactly 1 year since my younger brother Elias died. He was 3 years younger than me, but always seemed older. Calmer, kinder, more grounded. While I was the loud one, the one who pushed boundaries, Elias was the type to read in silence, to smile without needing a reason. The cancer hit fast. Acute leukemia. The doctors didn't sugarcoat it. They gave us a few months, maybe, but in the end, it was barely 8 weeks. I spent most of that time with him. I helped him eat when he couldn't lift his arms, held his hand when he was too weak to speak, tried to joke around just to make him laugh. In the final hours, when he was barely there, he looked right at me. Not scared, not sad, just knowing. "Don't stay alone," he whispered. That was the last thing he ever said. After that, everything shut down. There was a flat line on the monitor, a few soft words from the nurse, and then nothing. The world just stopped. I didn't cry much. Not at first. I think part of me refused to believe he was really gone. I disconnected from everything: school, friends, routines. I slept all day, stayed awake all night, barely ate. I thought maybe the silence would help me process it. Instead, it left space for something else. The first time I heard his voice again, it was around 3 a.m. I hadn't been asleep, just lying there, staring at the ceiling. The window cracked open to let in the late October wind. "Are you there?" It was faint, soft, coming from the hallway. I froze. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew that voice. I got up, opened the door, turned on the lights. Nothing. Every door was locked. Windows closed. No sound except my own heartbeat. The next night, it happened again. Same time. Same voice. "Are you there?" I told myself it was a trick of memory. Auditory hallucinations. Lack of sleep. That made sense. Right? But the voice kept coming back. Every night, at 3 a.m. sharp. And then the footsteps started. Soft, deliberate steps across the hallway floor, stopping just outside my bedroom. Never louder than a whisper, but impossible to ignore. Eventually, I started locking my door at night. I played white noise, music, anything. Sometimes I'd fall asleep with a podcast playing just to drown it out. But none of it worked. The sound always cut through. Always him. Then came the knocking. 3 soft taps. Then his voice, closer now. "Please, open the door." It never sounded threatening. Not angry or vengeful. Just pleading. Almost sad. I told myself I wouldn't give in. I wasn't going to open the door. I wasn't going to play into whatever this was. Grief, trauma, madness. But it didn't stop. Then it got worse. I started finding things around the apartment. Objects I hadn't seen in years. Stuff I knew was in a box on the attic, sealed and forgotten. A small, worn-out toy dinosaur on the windowsill. His favorite, the one he carried everywhere as a kid. A half-drunk Capri Sun on the kitchen table. Wild cherry. The exact flavor he used to beg Mom to buy. Each day, something new. Each night, his voice. Like the past was leaking into the present. Or something was trying to lure me back. Last night, I found his old diary on my desk. It had gone with him to the hospital. I packed it in his bag. He never wrote much in it, but it was something that brought him comfort. It never came back home with us. I'm absolutely certain of that. And yet, there it was. Dusty. Locked. Familiar. I opened it. Only one sentence had been added, written in a shaky but unmistakable hand on the last page. "I found a place for you." That's when I knew this wasn't just memory. This wasn't just grief. Something was actively reaching out. I've tried everything. I left town, booked hotel rooms, stayed with friends. I even rented a cabin hours away, in the middle of nowhere, and turned off my phone. But no matter where I go, at 3 a.m., I hear him. Even when I'm awake. Even when I know he can't possibly be there. And every night his voice changes. Just a little. Subtle at first. A slightly slower rhythm. A flatter tone. Like a recording wearing down. like a mask slowly slipping. If it's really Elias, why does he sound less and less like himself with every visit? Tonight is the anniversary of his death. 1 full year. And I'm hearing him already. No waiting for 3 a.m. this time. He's early. I hear footsteps in the hallway. Slower than usual. More deliberate. Closer. Then the whisper. Please. Open the door. I shouldn't. I know I shouldn't. Every part of me screams not to. But something inside me is whispering that tonight is different. That if I open it now, it might finally end. That maybe I'll see him. Just one more time. That maybe it won't stop unless I do. I'm standing up now. I'm walking to the door. My hand is on the lock. I'm going to open it. My mom swears she tucked me in last night. I live alone. I'm in need of some advice, but I don't even know what kind of help I should be after. Started about 3 weeks ago. I got a call from my mom on a cold Monday. We talk often enough, and a phone call from her isn't a strange occurrence at all. The only really strange part about it was that it was while I was on the clock at my job. I'm a nurse, so she usually would only call if something was important. I picked up the phone, fully expecting to hear that someone had died, only to be greeted by her familiar, gentle voice. She was casual, sweet, just asking about my day. Don't get me wrong, I love my mom, and I like talking to her. But I was at work, and it was a very busy day. I tried to politely excuse myself and get back to what I was doing. Before I could hang up, she said something that caught me off guard. I'm glad you're sleeping better. You looked so peaceful. I was caught a bit off guard by this. You see, I'm in my 20s and I've lived alone for almost 7 years now. What's more, my mom lives about 200 miles away from me. I didn't think much of it at the time, but as the day went on, for some reason, it bothered me more and more. After my shift, I called her again. And again, she began a casual, cheery conversation with me. What she had said earlier was burning into my brain at this point, so I asked her what she meant by that. Without missing a beat and in the same happy tone, she told me, well, you've been tossing and turning. I was just happy to see you sleeping peacefully last night. I didn't know what to say. I asked her if she was making a joke. Her response sounded just as confused as I was. She told me she had tucked me in last night. I didn't want to start an argument. My mother is not young, and there is a history of degenerative brain disease in some of our family. I was worried that maybe she was sick. I changed the topic again to her day and finished what turned into a relatively pleasant conversation, given the earlier confusion. I texted my brother immediately. He lives in the same town as my mom, and told him to check on her. Ever since then, I feel like I've been losing my mind. At first, I began to notice the smallest things, tiny instances that aren't as they should be. That day when I got home, for example, the chair at the head of my dining room table was pulled out too far. I could have sworn I tucked it in, but reason tells me I must have forgotten. My bed was made when I knew for a fact I didn't make it. It was folded and tucked under the mattress, the same way my mom did it when I was little. I called my brother. I had no idea what was going on. Maybe my mom had come to visit and was pranking me? It was unlike her, but what else could this be? He told me that he had just had tea with her. It's been getting worse and worse. At night, I can hear footsteps, but when I get up to look for their source, they vanish, leaving me questioning if I really heard anything at all. A few nights ago, I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of humming. It was faint, barely audible, but I recognized the melody instantly. It was the lullaby my mom used to sing to me when I was little, the one she hummed when I had nightmares. I froze. It was coming from my bedroom doorway. I couldn't bring myself to look. I just shut my eyes and lay there, stiff under the covers, trying not to breathe too loudly. Eventually, the sound faded. When I finally worked up the nerve to turn on the light, the room was empty. But the closet door, which I always leave open, was shut. I've been calling her during the day, but it's no use. She either denies any of it or simply speaks as if nothing was wrong. More often than not, she goes off on tangents that frustrate me to no end. I even recorded our last conversation, thinking maybe I could catch something, some slip, some change in her voice that would make sense of this. But when I played it back, the audio was crystal clear. Too clear. There was no background noise at all. No ambient hum. No shuffling. No clink of her spoon in her teacup like there always is. Just her voice, bright and cheerful, telling me she was proud of me. That I looked so calm now. I hadn't told her I was recording. And yet, right before the call ended, she said, "You should stop doing that. It's not polite. I've grown paranoid. I don't sleep in my bed anymore. I've taken to sleeping on the couch instead. But without fail, I wake up in my bed, neatly tucked under the covers. Last night, I stayed awake as long as I could. I thought if I could catch it in the act, I could prove to myself that this wasn't just in my head. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up. And I remember the hand that pulled the blanket over me. It wasn't hers. It was colder, thinner. The fingers were too long, and they didn't tremble the way hers used to. When it touched my forehead, there was no warmth, just a kind of pressure, like it was memorizing me. I kept my eyes shut. I don't know why. I think I thought if I looked at it, it would look back. But it knew I wasn't asleep. I can't explain it, but I could feel that it knew. It leaned closer. I could feel it, the weight of it pressing into the mattress beside me, slow and deliberate. The sound it made was low and wet, like thick saliva pulling apart in strands. Something dragged across my cheek. Not fingers this time. Something softer, frayed at the edges. Hair maybe, but it smelled like meat left too long in the sun. Then it spoke. "You don't cry anymore. Not like before." Its voice was trying to be hers, but it wasn't right. The words came out broken, halting, and slow, like someone reading phonetics off a cue card. And underneath it, something else breathed. Something heavier, labored, excited. I opened my eyes. There was nothing there. But the blankets were rising and falling beside me like someone invisible was still lying there, mimicking my breath. The indentation in the mattress was fresh, deep, and smeared along the pillow next to mine was a thick, dark streak, brown-red and rotting at the edges, like old blood mixed with dirt. When I looked back at the mirror, there was something sitting on the edge of the mattress. At first, I thought it was her. The hair was the same length, same part down the middle, but it was patchy, thin, and coarse in some places, clumped like wet straw in others. Tufts were missing altogether, exposing skin that looked stitched, like burlap pulled too tight over something that wasn't a skull. Tilted its head again. The motion was jerky, like a puppet on tangled strings. Then, slowly, it began to turn. I didn't want to see. Every instinct screamed at me to look away. But I couldn't. The face that met mine in the mirror was trying to be my mother. It had her eyes, at least it had eyes where hers used to be. But they were cloudy, too wide, like glass marbles pressed into soft clay. The nose was flat, crushed like something broken and reset wrong. The mouth was the worst part. It stretched too far, like it had been cut at the corners. The lips were split and scabbed, peeled back in a permanent smile that showed rows of tiny, baby-like teeth. Dozens of them. Too white, too clean. It was brushing its hand across the pillow, slow and tender. And then it looked up, not at the bed, at the mirror, at me, and it smiled. I backed away from the mirror, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. I didn't want to see it anymore. I didn't want it to see me, but I couldn't look away. The thing on the bed tilted its head, slowly, like it was curious. Then it raised one long, shaking arm and waved. I turned. Nothing was there. When I looked back at the mirror, it was gone. The bed was empty again, just rumpled blankets and silence. I stood there for a long time, barely breathing, too afraid to move. And then my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice was soft, calm. "Don't be scared, sweetheart," she said. "We just miss you." My father left me a set of VHS tapes when he passed away. The footage was disturbing. I was devastated when Dad died. I know it's cliché, but he was the best parent that I could have asked for. Though his health had been declining for a while and we knew that he didn't have long, it didn't make it any easier. I loved my father. I think that's part of what made the VHS tapes so shocking. I was visiting Mom, taking a bit of time off from work to grieve, when she revealed them to me. "Jeremy, I need to talk to you," she said, slowly taking a seat at the table. I rushed to help her into her chair, but she waved me off. Despite how bad her arthritis was, she was adamant that she was still just as lithe and nimble as a 19-year-old girl. "Is something wrong? It sounds serious," I said once she'd had a chance to adjust herself. Mom's expression seemed bleaker than usual, grim even. She hadn't been the same after Dad's passing, but this was something else, something darker. "Well, not exactly. Your father asked me to do this. He made me promise that if I outlived him, I was to give you these tapes. If it was up to me, I would have thrown them out ages ago. No one needs to know what's on them. But this was his dying wish, and I have to respect that." Mom nodded to a box lying on the kitchen table. I glanced at it, then turned back to her, unsure of what to make of her revelation. Okay, it's nothing illegal, is it? "Mom, this is kind of freaking me out." She stared at the table before her, her eyes a contemplating mix of emotions. "I can't say for certain." A gnawing sense of unease began to twist my stomach into knots. "All right, if they're that bad, I'm sure you won't want to watch them with me. Can I borrow your VHS player for a few days? I'll bring it back when I'm done." "Yes, but Jeremy, please know before you watch those tapes that your father was a different man back then. I don't want those videos to change your perception of him." I took a deep breath, considering her words. I can't promise anything without seeing them, but I hope they don't. I didn't watch the VHS tapes for months. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. If they were really that shocking, I didn't know if I ever wanted to see them. Mom didn't bring it up again, but she seemed different after that day. Every time she looked at me, I could see shame hiding beneath her gaze. I felt sorry for her. This wasn't her fault. Now, I don't know how to feel. After half a year, I had completely forgotten about them. The tapes sat on my bookshelf gathering dust, blending in with the fixtures in the room. It was my girlfriend who reminded me that they were even there. "Jay, why do you have a box of VHS tapes? Have you been watching naughty videos behind my back?" She huffed, crossing her arms. "What? No, I haven't even seen those yet. I got them from my dad when he passed." Emma's look of suspicion melted away as her cheeks flushed with color. "I'm so sorry. I wouldn't have brought it up if I'd known. Do you want to watch them together? I know this has been really tough for you, and I want to support you any way that I can." I mulled it over for a moment before making my decision. "Thanks for the offer. I really appreciate you being here for me, but I think this is something that I need to do alone." Emma pursed her lips and nodded, before pulling me into a warm embrace. I watched the tapes that night. I decided that I'd been putting it off for long enough. Best to get it over with, right? It took longer than I'd like to admit to get the VHS player set up. It wasn't difficult, but technology and I do not see eye to eye. I took a deep breath as I popped in the first tape, sank into my sofa, and pressed play on the remote. The video began with a pitch-black screen. A faint rustling followed, before Dad came into frame, his face too close to the camera. He placed his camcorder down before backing away. "This is trial number 1. Jeremy, if you're watching, then I'm probably not around anymore. I don't think anyone is going to believe this. Hell, I don't even believe it myself. But I think I've caught my big break. If I'm right, then I may have found the cure for death." "That's right," he grinned. "I think I've discovered the compound for immortality." Even through the poor quality, I could see a manic gleam in my father's eyes. This man wasn't the same one who raised me. He couldn't be. Dad worked in medicine, but he had never uttered a peep about any of this. And that expression, I barely recognized him. Dad stepped off screen for a moment, and my heart dropped. Behind him, strapped to an operating table, was a child me. I was unconscious in my parents' basement, blissfully unaware of what my father was doing. I leaned forward, horrified, yet morbidly curious. Dad walked back into frame, wielding a syringe filled with a liquid blacker than night. It was so dark that it seemed to consume the light surrounding it. "Here it is, my magnum opus. If my theory is correct, this compound should have the ability to regenerate cells. In short, it should eliminate the possibility of death by natural causes." Cells will no longer wither away. In other words, the body will not age past maturity. I pray that this works. My heart hammered in my chest as Dad plunged the needle into my arm. Almost immediately afterward, my body began to writhe and convulse on the operating table. Dad's face dropped. He clearly hadn't anticipated that. The convulsions stopped as quickly as they began, much to his relief. But then my eyes shot open. They were completely black. A deep, inhuman cackling erupted from my lips. Dad went pale as a ghost. "Thank you," I said in a voice that was not my own. "You have given me a vessel, foolish human." The table shook violently, my arms and legs flailing in their constraints. I continued to cackle in that disturbing bellow as Dad watched helplessly. "I hope you know what you've done. This child will never be rid of me. Never. I may lie dormant for years, waiting until the time is right, but know that you have sealed his fate." Then the recording cut off. I stared at the blank screen, unable to comprehend what I had just witnessed. That was impossible. It had to be a skit, or a fabrication. I couldn't accept that what I had just seen was real. I had to know the truth. I ejected the first tape from the VHS player and replaced it with the second. I watched for hours. Every tape afterward was a near replica of the one before it. Instead of trying to find the serum for immortality, Dad was attempting to cure me of my affliction. Each video played out the same way. He would explain what the drug was, why it was supposedly going to work, and my body would writhe on the table. The demon, or whatever ungodly creature that was, would return and mock my father. Then the video would end. By the time I reached the last tape, my hope was wearing thin. Dad had failed dozens of times. Countless different injections had no effect in reversing the damage. My breath hitched in my throat as I pressed play on the final video. "Jeremy, I'm sorry. I'm all out of ideas." What began as an experiment born out of love quickly soured into a curse that you have to bear. I never should have tried this. The guilt of my actions is eating me alive. He took a moment to wipe away the tears welling in his eyes. "I don't know what else to do. I've been trying to fix my mistake for 12 years. You're going off to college in a few days, and without you living under my roof, I won't be able to conduct these experiments any longer. I'm sorry, son. I failed you." That was it. The video cut to black, and I was left to sit there and think about what I had just seen. It's been 4 months since then. Over the past week, I've been blacking out. Huge chunks of my day have been disappearing from my memory without a trace. I'm not sure what exactly is going on, but I think it's related to Dad's experiments. I don't know what it wants with me, but I'm terrified, because I think that thing from the tapes has finally awakened. My toddler's first words have left me totally paranoid. I know it's cliché, but ever since Edward was born, I've wanted him to say, "Mama." Before I go any further, please know that I'm in a state of grieving. If you're going to make rude statements protected by the anonymity of this platform, you can keep those to yourselves. I've seen what people say here from my husband's post, which the mod said I had to call part 1, even though that makes it sound fake. It isn't. To the users on that post who said, "Throw that whole baby away," and the 2 who said to punt the baby, how dare you? And it's not like the other comments were any better. If anything, they were explicitly unhelpful. My husband came to people he trusted with a problem, and all of you just laughed in his face. Now he's dead, and I partially blame all of you. Actually, I almost wholly blame you. Obviously, this is not Darren. I'm Hannah, his widow. I don't want to be posting here from his old account. This is literally the last thing I thought I'd be doing 3 months after burying the love of my life. And I'm not here for an apology either. If anything, I need you all to make this right, because I can't ignore what's going on any longer. I'll start at the beginning. Darren was recently killed in an accident. He hadn't been sleeping well and was working in the yard. He didn't secure his ladder when Eddie ran out to play, and it got tipped. When I got outside, Eddie was squealing and Darren had fallen, lying unconscious. He never woke up after that. My husband didn't have a will, but he had secretly taken out a life insurance policy a few weeks prior. The insurer wasn't happy, but there were no 2 ways around it. They paid after investigating. They had to use a detective to make sure Darren wasn't fraudulent or faking his death. Apparently, that's common in life insurance. That was how I learned about Part 1, when they did his digital autopsy. Reading Part 1 was horrible, even if no one had ever commented and upvoted that dumb crap. For instance, Darren saying he'd seen Eddie kill Coco, and lying about it to me. Then, Darren saying he feared for his own life now that Eddie could say, "Dada?" The story sounded ludicrous. It still does. Having a fear that your toddler-age son might kill you because he could say your name? No wonder he never said anything to me. I don't know, I would have believed him. I wouldn't have. Until now. Now I'm worried that my own life may be in danger. It all started the day of the ladder accident. There we were in the hospital room, where the ER doctor had just told us they couldn't bring Darren back. And Eddie just turned to me and blurted out, "Mama!" After weeks and months of hoping to hear that, and realizing he may have some kind of speech disability, he finally said Mama. It brought tears to my eyes. I think I must have bawled for like 10 minutes, just sitting there. After that, Eddie didn't stop either. Not on the car ride home, not at his dad's funeral, and not in the weeks that followed. All that Eddie says now is Mama. Like I said, he probably has a speech impediment or learning disability. Maybe it's my fault, buying too much baby food with artificial red dye. But then, and I don't really know how to say this, that's when strange stuff started to happen. Like weird stuff. I had a near miss with an electrical outlet. I swear I'd turned it off when I was working on our pool. But then, pow, I got the shock of my life. If it hadn't been for the, tripwire or whatever it's called, I'd have been electrified. I checked our Ring camera after that. Eddie had fiddled with the outlet when I wasn't looking. He managed to peel off the outlet covers and plugged the cable right back in. I thought it was a sign of intelligence. Maybe he'd be one of those kids who was a late bloomer talking, but his brain was still great. Then came the kitchen knives. They'd ended up in Eddie's hands twice, despite toddler locks on the cabinets. He screamed bloody murder and tried to slash me when I tried to take them from him. He actually drew blood the second time. I sound like a horrible mother, but I swear to you, I've got certified toddler-safe locks on everything. More so now after all this. And it hasn't stopped. When we're out driving, Eddie manages to wiggle out of his secured car seat and try to distract me. Of course, that nearly got us into a massive wreck. Then there's our families. Of course, I'm mortified that his parents or mine would ever find out about what's really inside my head. Eddie feels determined to harm me, and that's horrible to say. I'm ashamed to be saying that out loud. That's when I thought back on Darren's post. And this is awful to say, but his words almost made sense. I pushed that thought away, yet the coincidences just piled on. Under a deluge of the unexplained, I can't deny that something is deeply wrong. Darren said, I should have been elated, but inside, all I felt was terror. Eddie said my name, and that meant somehow, at some unknown moment, I was going to be next. Maybe Darren was next. What does that make me? My house is empty, but my friend who is deaf and blind insists someone is here. They say seeing is believing, but if I'd followed that advice, I'd be dead now. It was a deaf-blind friend who first told me there was someone in the house with me. I scoffed. I didn't believe him. I looked out across the wide-open empty living room. I looked upstairs in the den and spare bedroom and out at the patio and in the kitchen. It was just the two of us. But my friend, Will, insisted. While he was sitting on the base of the stairs, tracing his fingers along the ornate sculpted banister, I went upstairs to grab something from the den. He felt another set of footsteps on the stairs after mine. Following me up, he told me afterward in sign language when we sat down at the table for tea. Then he asked me who else was here. I chuckled, my fingers tickling his leg in laughter, and told him he must have imagined it. But he claimed he could smell them. When I asked him to describe the smell, he said it smelled bad, a sort of garbage smell. Someone who needed a bath or hung out in the trash. Maybe my trash needed to go out, I said, and insisted it was just us. Are you sure? He and I were supposed to be working on the script for a game we were developing together. But he interrupted my suggestions to exclaim, There, do you smell it? I didn't smell a thing, nor did I see anyone in the living room with us. Does your nose actually work? Or is it just a decoration on your face? Will burst, exasperated. When I dropped him off back at his apartment later after we'd finished our work together. As he was getting out of the car, he warned me again that I definitely have another person hiding somewhere in my home. His hands described the feel to me, 2 fingers of his right hand walking up my arm toward my shoulder, 2 fingers of his left following behind, softer. Then he tapped his hand along my arm, showing me the feel of the vibration. First heavier, more solid, my steps, and then lighter, but still palpable, the second set of steps following mine and vibrating the wooden stairs. I patted his arm in affirmation and told him I'd search the house when I got home. Be careful, he said, his signing emphatically slow, and gave my arm a final squeeze before tapping his way to the front of his building with his white cane. As soon as I got home, I searched the house. But I couldn't imagine where an intruder might conceal themselves. It was a cozy house, 2 levels with small square footage. The rent was suspiciously low, but I chalked that up to the lack of AC, creaky pipes, and age of the place. I looked under the sink, in the closets, in the cupboards, in the spare bedroom. I even bought a camera and set it up, but all I captured overnight was myself sleepwalking. I vaguely remembered waking on the staircase and returning to bed. Other than that, the motion capture didn't turn on. According to the video, I was alone in my house. Still, the next morning I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. It said that if you lose one sense, your others become sharper to compensate, but what if the reverse is also true? Was my reliance on my eyes causing my brain to shut out my other senses? What if I tried closing my eyes? It seemed silly. Even so, on a whim, that evening I went around the house wearing a blindfold. I was feeling my way through the kitchen, filling a glass with water from the sink when I felt the presence of someone. I couldn't pinpoint why. I just had the sense of not being alone. The hairs on my neck rose, and suddenly I was absolutely certain someone was coming up behind me. I snatched off my blindfold. Just me. Still, the feeling lingered for a moment, those goosebumps persisting on my arms. I put the blindfold back on and puttered around in the kitchen for a while. It was then I noticed the smell. Like rotten meat, like unwashed flesh, spoiled and awful, and it was so faint, just wafting occasionally. The hairs on the nape of my neck stood up. I went upstairs trying to follow the smell, but I lost it almost immediately when I went into my den. I came back downstairs, my fingers lightly tracing the wall. Thud, thud, thud. I stopped because I felt footsteps behind me. Felt the soft reverberation on the wooden staircase, just a beat after my own. It was just like Will had described to me. Someone was here, right behind me. I felt cold breath on my ear. I tore off the blindfold and whirled around. The staircase was empty. That night, as I lay in bed, I had trouble drifting to sleep. I was afraid of what might happen overnight. And sure enough, I woke up on the stairs, sleepwalking. But instead of returning to bed, I tried to keep myself in that dreamy state and I held my eyes closed. My arm was cold. Took me a moment to realize that someone was holding my hand. A touch of icy fingers drawing me forward. Those dead fingers leading me up the stairs. Every instinct told me to tear my hand away and run, but I let the dead hand guide me up until I was on the landing. The rotten smell made my eyes water as the door to the spare bedroom opened. An overwhelming sense of dread made it hard to breathe as the hand guided me across the room. Then my fingers touched the cool handle to the balcony door and pushed the door open, fresh air gusting around me. I yanked back, terror shooting through me, and rushed for the light switch. I was alone again. I'm now looking for a new place to live. Will is right. I'm not alone. And my life is in danger every night I stay here. I've got to get out as soon as I can. But my budget is tight, and housing is scarce in this area. So until I find a place, I've installed a bolt on the balcony doors and moved a heavy bookcase in front of them, and I've locked that spare bedroom. You see, I did some research and found out that the tenant who lived here before me died by hanging himself from the balcony of the upstairs bedroom. Before him, there was an old woman who lived here with her daughter, and the daughter was also found hanging. In fact, I don't know how many people before me have died here, seemingly by taking their own lives. The house is not reported to be haunted, because no one has ever seen a ghost here. But every day, I feel someone in the house with me, their footsteps treading just behind mine. And every night, those dead fingers take my hand and try to lead me out to the balcony. A few months ago, my wife started to eat some unusual things. At first, it wasn't anything too far out of the ordinary. I have never been a good cook but have always loved to grill in the backyard. For the first decade and a half of our marriage, I clearly remember Nicole always ate her steaks well done. I had gone to the butcher early one day back in the summer and picked up 3 beef fillets. The weather had been beautiful. I wanted to get out and enjoy it. Grilling was an excellent excuse to soak up the last rays of sun on a warm evening, and Nicole enjoyed a break from cooking. The steaks had been seasoned and reached room temperature as I stood in front of the grill. Nicole had stepped out onto the patio and walked up next to me. I saw her put her index finger into the red liquid on the plate and swirl circular patterns through it. "William Stewart," she proclaimed. "How did you know I was craving steaks?" "Sometimes a husband just knows," I responded with a smile. "There's a well-done fillet in your future, madam." She giggled and continued to run her finger through the red runoff on the plate. "How about rare today?" she asked. "Rare?" I questioned. "Not really your style, is it? You always tell me the steak with the best flavor still has some pink in the middle," she replied. I tossed the steaks on the grill and listened to the rhythmic sizzling. "Rare may be a bit much for you," I said. "Why don't we try medium?" She kissed my neck and slipped her arms around my waist. "Rare," she whispered. I nodded in agreement. Nicole removed her arms from my waist and swirled her finger through the red liquid on the plate again before picking it up and heading inside. My eyes drifted to her as she passed through the kitchen door. Through the window, I could see her slide the plate into the sink. The reflection on the window made it difficult to see, but I could have sworn I saw her put the bloody fingertip in her mouth. That evening, all of us sat at the table outside. Our daughter, Brooklyn, had returned home from a visit with her grandparents just in time for dinner. She and I discussed all the little adventures she had been on during her visit, but Nicole didn't participate very much. She was fixated on the steak. Usually, she ate slowly, mouth closed as she chewed, and dotted at the corners of her mouth with a napkin. Not that night. Nicole didn't as much cut the steak as rip it apart. Ragged shreds of beef nearly dangled from her mouth as she chewed loudly and openly. Brooklyn didn't seem to notice as she recounted her visit to me, but I couldn't help but listen to the wet gnashing of teeth as Nicole consumed the steak. Brooklyn was still telling me about all the fun she had as I saw Nicole soak up all of the red runoff from her steak on a dinner roll and eat it greedily. Rare or blue steak became the norm for Nicole after that. A few weeks later, when I arrived home from the office, she was hard at work in the kitchen preparing dinner. I had purchased a few steaks the previous evening and had planned to cook them myself, but Nicole had texted me during the day to tell me she had planned to cook them herself. At the time, I recall thinking it would be nice to have a little break after work, and I had agreed. I wish I hadn't. Generally, when she cooked dinner, I could smell the aroma of delicious food before I came in through the garage door. Tonight, that telltale aroma was absent. Even as I walked into the kitchen from the garage, there was still no smell of cooked dinner. I wasn't upset when I thought she hadn't cooked, but it was odd for her not to already be hard at it. As I rounded the corner from the door, to my surprise, Nicole was working diligently at the counter. 3 white dinner plates sat on the kitchen island. Something pink about the shape of a hockey puck and twice as tall was in the center of each dish. A yellow oval sat atop the pink discs covered in flecks of green. "Welcome home," Nicole said as she smiled in my direction. "I made us something new to try tonight." She gestured toward the plates on the counter. I smiled wearily. "What is it?" I asked as politely as I could. "It looks interesting. Steak tartare," she said with excitement. "I chopped the steaks you bought, seasoned them, and topped them with a raw egg. A little European flair for the evening." I still remember how enthusiastic she looked that evening as I looked at the plates. "Isn't that raw, Nicole?" I asked. "May not be a great idea for Brooklyn. I'm not sure those cuts were grated to eat without cooking them." The excited look melted off of her face. Then cook something for the two of you, she responded angrily. I've busted my ass in the kitchen trying to bring a little bit of class to this family, and this is the thanks I get. I tried to apologize, but Nicole just held her hand up in my direction to silence me. She scooped up the plates and pushed the raw piles of beef onto one dish before taking it outside and eating it on the patio table. Taken aback by the hostility, I made a few sandwiches and called Brooklyn down for dinner. Nicole didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. Over the coming weeks, Nicole stopped giving me the cold shoulder and things mostly returned to normal. When she cooked dinner, it was a commonplace dish again. Nothing raw or out of the ordinary. It was a relief that there was no recurrence of the tartare incident. I did notice that Nicole would barely pick at the food she cooked. Even when she did take a bite, her lips would curl into a sneer as though the flavor was making her sick. She rarely ate more than a fourth of her plate. It became common for raw cuts of meat or ground beef to vanish from the refrigerator. The first time I noticed it, a tray of ribeyes that I had seasoning in the fridge was missing. When I asked Nicole what had happened, she told me that Roscoe, our golden retriever, had knocked the tray onto the floor and eaten them. While it wasn't entirely impossible, I had never known Roscoe to attempt to snatch food like that. He had always enjoyed a life full of table scraps but had waited patiently for them. Never so much as a whine to beg for a bite. The next week, 3 pounds of ground beef vanished. Nicole acted as though she had never seen it when I asked her what had happened. I even went as far as to show her the grocery pickup order on my phone, but she insisted that they have forgotten to place it in the bag. I knew she was wrong. It had been there. I put the damn groceries away and still recall putting it in the meat drawer at the bottom of the fridge. Later the next day, I was tossing a bag of garbage into the pickup bin when I saw a single styrofoam meat tray at the bottom. There wasn't a drop of blood left on it. A few days later, Roscoe vanished. He was 7 years old, and not once had he ever left the confines of our yard. We lived in the country, and our lot was large enough for him to run freely on, but he never left our line of sight. The farthest he had gone was to the woodline behind the house, but that was it. Nicole said she had let him go out to use the bathroom, but before she could stop him, he had run to the road and vanished. We drove around for hours calling his name, but never saw him. Brooklyn had gone with me and sobbed loudly as we called for him. Nicole stayed home, unconcerned. While cutting up a fallen tree in the backyard a week after Roscoe had vanished, I could smell the sickly sweet scent of decay. Turning the chainsaw off and stepping into the underbrush, I tried to find the source. Flies buzzed loudly 100 feet ahead, and when I reached the spot, the stench was overwhelming. I pulled back the overgrowth and found a pile of bones and a hairy pelt matted with blood. It appeared all of the meat was gone. Reaching down and picking up a stick, I prodded the pile of rot to try and identify what kind of animal it had been. As a wet pile of skin and bones sloughed to the side, my heart dropped. Roscoe's brass name tag and collar sat at the bottom of the remains. I found Roscoe, I said to Nicole that evening. That's sad, she replied flatly. Nicole sat in a large armchair in our bedroom with the lights off. This had become her routine. She rarely left the bedroom now and always sat in the dark. Why is it sad? I asked. Brooklyn will be sad her dog is dead, she said in the same monotone voice. Do you want to tell her? I never said he was dead, Nicole. I spat. How did you know? She didn't respond. Answer the question, I said angrily. I hadn't told you yet. He's been gone a week, she replied without care. If he was alive, you would have sounded happier. Leave me alone. My head hurts. I left the room and slammed the door. There was no way to prove she had done something to Roscoe, but my stomach turned with the thought. Nicole had been so sweet and gentle our entire lives, but I knew she had killed him. Worse was the fact that Roscoe's body was nothing but bones and pelt. All of the meat was gone. I buried Roscoe in the tree-line and never talked to Brooklyn about it. The month after, while I was driving home from work, my cell phone began to ring. I didn't recognize the number, so I sent it to voicemail. A few moments later, my phone chirped to alert me a new message was in my inbox. I put the phone to my ear and listened to the gleeful voice. Hey there, Mr. and Mrs. Stewart. This is Selma at the Humane Society. Just calling to check in and see how the new cats are doing. I hope they are well. Don't forget to bring them in for their checkup next Monday. Thank you for fostering them. The shelter appreciates it so much. Bye. The message ended. We hadn't fostered any cats. I punched the callback button on my cell phone and listened to the ringtone. Humane Society. Selma speaking. The same chipper voice from the voicemail poured through the phone. Hi, Selma, I muttered. This is William Stewart. You left a message about us having fostered some cats. I'm afraid you've made a mistake. Hang on, she said, and I could hear her typing feverishly on a keyboard. Nope. It says here that last week Nicole Stewart signed the two of you up for our fostering program. Nicole took custody of 3 cats while they await their forever homes. Is everything okay? I ended the call. When I arrived at the house, I immediately walked to the treeline. As I drew closer to the spot where I had found Roscoe's remains, the smell of rot filled the air again. The swarm of flies was visible in the distance as well. I bounded through the vegetation until I reached the place where I had found our dog. A pile of rotting pelts and tiny bones lay on the ground. Flies and maggots worked their way in and out of the folds of skin. There wasn't a single scrap of meat to be found. Knowing Brooklyn wouldn't have been home from school yet, I stormed to the house to confront Nicole. It had been my fault I turned such a blind eye to this, but I had had enough. Whatever was wrong with her, we had to get her help. I searched the entire house, but Nicole was nowhere to be found. Call after call to her cell phone went unanswered. She didn't return any of my text messages. After a call to her work, her family, and our friends, no one reported seeing her. She never came back to the house. Brooklyn asked me where she had gone, but I told her truthfully that I didn't know. After an initial call to the police that night, they told me that Nicole was an adult and had the right to leave. Unless I had reason to believe something bad had happened to her, I would have to wait to file a missing persons report. It only took a day after calling the police for them to call me back. Detective O'Hara, the officer that contacted me, asked if he could come to the house and ask me a few questions about my wife. I agreed. We sat on the back porch in the midday sun as Detective O'Hara scribbled away in his pocket-sized notebook. He was a middle-aged man with a vanishing hairline, protruding stomach, and hard eyes. So when was the last time you saw Nicole? He asked without looking up. 2 days ago, I replied. I called you guys that night, but whoever answered told me I couldn't file a report unless I suspected something bad had happened to her. Have you found something? Yes and no, he responded. We do want to move forward with the missing persons report on your wife. My heart began to beat quickly. Do you have any reason to expect that someone would have wanted to hurt her? O'Hara questioned. Does she have any connections with anyone in the area that may be in danger? I don't think so, I replied. Do you think she's been hurt? What happened? Why are you willing to take the report now? Detective O'Hara closed his notebook and slid it into his shirt pocket. He rubbed his eyes with the tip of his fingers before fishing a cigarette out of a pack in his other pocket. The flame of his lighter danced on the tip of his cigarette. We found some remains in the woods a few miles from your house, he said sternly. We think they are the remains of 2 adults of undetermined age and sex. It'll be on the evening news tonight. Big press conference. I sat in silence. I do not know that any of the remains belong to your wife, but her disappearance lines up with the discovery of the bodies. Can I go to the morgue and try to identify her? I asked. Warm tears had started gathering in my eyes. No, sir, Detective O'Hara. There isn't enough of the bodies left to identify. We'll have to do dental match identification on the remains. You said her disappearance lines up with when the bodies were found. I sobbed. How could they be so decomposed in 2 days that you need to do a dental match? O'Hara crushed the smoldering cigarette below his heel and lit another. They aren't decomposed, he said quietly. Someone cut all of the muscle and tissue off of the bodies. Nicole is still missing. Her dentist was able to provide x-rays to the police. None of the recovered bodies have matched with her. The police keep telling me they will find her, but I know they won't. My wife started eating strange things, and I am fairly certain that it has gotten worse. I'm a hazmat cleaner in a very specific niche. Basically, I clean hoarder houses, as well as family homes after traumatic deaths. It's a necessary job. First, imagine the worst thing that could possibly happen to you, like being a parent whose teenager just shot herself, or the survivor of a murder-suicide. Then imagine going home after the reports are filed and the detectives are done, and having to scrub your loved one's dried brains off the walls. That's where I come in. It's surprisingly easy to acclimate to corpses and gore. Depending on the situation, bloodstains can be hard to deal with only because they're always in context. The spatter on the children's SpongeBob quilt, the smears across the cheerfully rustic kitchen, the violent spray over family portraits. The stark evidence of violence over the normal trappings of a family home can be disturbing. But even that gets easier over time. The hardest part is the smell. Sweet and almost gooey, with undertones of vomit and fetid swamp, sweat and unwashed skin. The stench strengthens and weakens seemingly on a whim. Sometimes I swear it moves, drifting across a room or directly overhead, or lunging forward to swallow me. But the rest really doesn't bug me anymore. Even mattresses dripping with decomposition juice get unremarkable after a while. Now, a couple days ago, I was assigned to a suicide house. The victim was a middle-aged lady with hoarding issues. She lived alone. Her much older brother lived in a nursing home. She called him like clockwork once a week. Suddenly, she stopped calling. For weeks passed and he was frantic. He has dementia and other issues. His sister was his only family, the only one other than the parish priest who ever came to visit, so he felt her absence keenly. By the time his caretakers finally called in a welfare check, his sister had been dead for at least 3 weeks. It was pretty ghastly, as advanced decomposition tends to be. The one good thing I can say is at least it's been a cold spring out here. Low temperatures alleviate the stench somewhat. The house is a neat, narrow little 2-story with a slightly overgrown yard and a tiny grove of apple trees out back. Nothing out of the ordinary. Inside was another story. It's hard to describe bad hoarder situations. Entire rooms are overwhelmed with literal mountains of trash. Clothes and stuffed animals, books and papers, cheap gas station figurines, cat litter, dead animals, old electronics. The list is endless, and somehow it all looks the same. Just a morass of garbage and forgotten belongings steadily claiming the house from its human occupant. This lady was no different. Treacherous slopes made from old newspapers and books filled every corner. Christmas trees, stuffed animals, dishes, garbage, pillows, and so much more filled out the rest, claustrophobic, filthy, and foul-smelling. As cleaners, we typically just throw everything away. The filth and biohazard issues make donation impossible. If we find something valuable, jewelry, antiques, and so on, we set it aside for the estate. For the most part, though, these belongings are worth less than the trash bags we put them in. Again, this lady was no different. It took 2 days to clear a path to the back of the house and 3 days to actually empty out the rooms. It took a full day to clear the stairs, which, for some reason, were literally coated with dried vegetation and what looked like a metric ton of table salt. According to real estate information, which we always dredge up before entering a home, the second level had 2 bedrooms and an office. This is where things suddenly got weird. The bedrooms were immaculately clean, which was impossible. The entire stairwell had been packed floor to ceiling with garbage. There was no way this lady would have been able to clean up here. Even if she'd been climbing through a window every day, the entire situation defied hoarder behavior. Ignoring a sudden case of the creeps, I inspected each bedroom. While thoroughly permeated with the stench of the lady's recently removed corpse, they were utterly spotless. The paint on the walls even glistened. The office was more like it, stuffed from floor to ceiling with dead plants, specimen cases, and paintings. About a dozen taxidermy animals sat in a neat row, facing the wall. It wasn't as filthy as the downstairs by any means, but it was much more in line with my expectations. Due to the smell, most of the stuff cool as it was couldn't be salvaged. There's just no reliable way to get 3 weeks of steadily worsening corpse stench out of household belongings. Even so, I took a good look at most of it. I'm an amateur zoologist. Thought I was going to be Steve Irwin when I grew up, majored in biology and everything. So this is where it all gets awfully strange. First, the specimen cases. These are the small glass displays, usually around 12 by 12, that people use to pin dead bugs and blossoms. You know, like butterflies and beetles? Now, these things were definitely bugs, but they weren't normal. For example, one was a coppery caterpillar with a flat, almost humanoid face. Pinkish skin, wrinkles, eyelids sinking down into empty sockets and everything. Another was this arachnid thing with a bluish, crab-like body and a single desiccated eye peering up from the thorax. Yet another looked underdeveloped, almost fetal. It had wrinkled sage-colored flesh and long ears that reminded me of a basset hound. At this point, I was pretty sure I'd stumbled on some eccentric lady's collection of gag gifts. The taxidermy animals made the joke theory a lot harder to believe. The first one I saw was this tiny, slow-eyed thing with beautiful features corrupted by unnatural proportions. The second was basically a giant, lacquered anemone with what must have been 1,000 rot-rimmed holes boring through the tentacles. The worst looked like a person, with a frozen, open-mouthed smile that spread to its ears and 5 glassy eyes arching over the upper lip. By this point, I felt paranoid, even frightened. This wasn't right. None of this was right. A typical hoarder house on the first floor blocked off from a pristine, empty second floor? And what were these things? Sophisticated fakes? Somebody's forgotten art installation? But how did these things get up here? And how were they all so clean? Because I was no longer sure if these items qualified as garbage, I carefully sorted and stacked everything. Then I got started on the walls. Paintings cluttered every inch, literally fitting together like puzzle pieces. Most were more or less unremarkable, if cool-looking, lots of surreal landscapes and stylized creatures, which are catnip to my fantasy-loving self. But one painting in particular trapped my attention and wouldn't let it go. About 7 feet tall and maybe 3 feet wide, it dominated the room. Rendered in 100 shades of green and black and gray, it depicted a misty, primeval forest drenched in moonlight. Luminescent flowers sprouted along upraised tangles of tree roots. A tall, forbidding figure peered through the trees, half-cloaked in soft darkness. No features, but the suggestion of strength was clear in its broad shoulders and long, sinewy limbs. A curtain of hair reflected the moonlight. I couldn't discern the color. The shadows were too deep, the lines and hues of the figure too indistinct to even begin to guess. After a few minutes, I realized all the hair on my arms was standing on end. With a huge, cathartic shudder, I spun around and pretended to survey the room. Or rather, pretended I wasn't afraid. As I stood there trying to mentally reset, a draft swept the room. Wet, cool, almost inviting, and, after the endless odor of human rot, beautifully sweet. Trying to remember when I'd opened the window, I turned. For a long, mesmerizing minute, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. That enormous painting had come to life. Tendrils of strange leaves swayed in that chilly, fresh wind. The glowing flowers bobbed, flattening slightly against the roots as the wind buffeted them. Somewhere deep in that unearthly landscape, a high, atonal song sounded. Wordless and open-throated, I imagined it echoing off icy peaks and down below in low, swampy valleys. It made me think of forests and mountains, wild rivers and endless plains. The only thing I couldn't picture was the creature singing the song. The figure stood silently. Only its hair moved, rippling in the wind like a banner. Then it took a long, sure-footed step forward. Moonlight glanced off its face, illuminating an impossible sharp cheekbone and a dark, cavernous eye. I bolted. I tripped down the stairs, falling flat on my face at the landing, then scrabbled up and ran out of the house. I don't even think I locked the door. I know I shouldn't go back. I don't know what that thing in the painting is. Honestly, I'm not even convinced it's real. But the thing is, I want to go back. Not because I'm fearless, far, far from it, but because I want to know more. I'm not the only one, am I? I mean, how do you look at this stuff and not ask what, why, or how? How do you not want to cross the threshold into that painting and see what's there? I don't know. Part of me definitely wants to call in sick for the next month. But part of me wants to go back. Maybe even tonight. Like I said, I don't think I locked the door. I won't necessarily go upstairs or anything. I'd just be making sure the place is secure. Before I go, if I go at all, has anyone encountered something like this? Do any of those taxidermy creatures ring a bell? I know it's a shot in the dark, but if you have any ideas, I'd like to hear them.